She's a Policy and Political Education Officer for the local Labour Party.
Okay, hello everybody. Right, what a big topic in 10 minutes, but I'm just going to draw your attention to a few aspects of a sustainable economy and the kind of direction we could go in if we put our attention to it and committed ourselves to living a very different life. But first of all, I want to pick up on what Gareth was talking about and take a look at what's wrong with the current economic system. Because if we're going to change and we're going to go towards something fundamentally different, then we need to be aware of like the downsides of the current system, because there are some things that we want to create anew, but there are some things that we're going to need to change and to actually get rid of. And so we need to be aware of what those things are. Right, okay, so what can we say about the current system? Well, most of you will have heard statistics like, you know, that the 1% hold as much wealth as, you know, 80% of the world's wealth. So the wealth is in the hands of a very, very small number of people. So it's estimated that 42 people in this globe of ours hold as much wealth as the poorest 3.7 billion people. That is approximately half the world's population. So this is how unequal and unfair this entire global system that we've got. And I call it global because the economy that's kind of practiced throughout the world now is a version of neoliberalism, and that's another word that you might have heard of and that you don't necessarily know much about. So what does it stand for? So it's an extreme form of like what we might call classical or neoclassical economics, which kind of started off with Adam Smith back in the 1700s at the kind of dawn of industrialization and as capitalism was really forming. And Adam Smith conceived of man and economic man as being very rational and self-serving, out to maximizing the kind of best for himself. And neoliberalism has taken that a step further by actually calling us now consumers rather than citizens. So everything is down to transactions in the marketplace. Hence the financialization of almost everything that we consider dear in our human domain, you know, down to caring for one another and things like that. So neoliberalism behind particular economic policies also has this vision of what a person, of what it is like to be a human being. And that is what the sustainability and models of economics that are really questioning the fundamental views that we hold in keeping this whole economic system in its place. Because we've also had the growth of experts, and so there are so many things going on in our modern lives that we don't have control of. And yet, if we look at the kind of messages that come out of the old system that are still being paraded now, you just have to listen to Radio 4 and the business program, and you know, growth is good. That mantra is not challenged whatsoever. You know, business growth is good because business growth means more profits for people. And from that, you know, the trickle-down theory of like what's good for business will be good for everybody else still maintains. So there are lots of myths about economics really that are kind of perpetrated here, that the market is the best place for kind of sorting out everything, really. Consumer voices can be heard because supply and demand mechanisms will kind of indicate to businesses just what is wanted and what isn't. It doesn't matter that things like advertising and marketing really push certain products at us in our most vulnerable states, many of which we are not conscious of. And so, you know, consumerism rises and addiction is a real problem as part of the kind of consumption patterns of our society. And of course, increased consumption is part of this growth pattern that kind of underlies what we're talking about. Okay, so I've got 5 minutes left. There's not much time, so let's have a look at the first bit of low-tech information I've got here. So here we have accelerated growth, and look at this. The global economy output in 2017 was 10 times that in 1950. That is how much it has actually grown, and it's still growing upwards. And of course, as Gareth was pointing out, growth or GDP is not necessarily the best of indicators of the health of an economy or the health of a society. Because if you're really going to ask what is the purpose of an economy, surely it is somewhere in the direction of it is for our human good, it is for our human flourishing, it is for meeting our basic and developmental needs as human beings. And I think that there aren't many economists until very recently who've been asking that very basic question: what is the purpose of an economy? Thank you. So, number 2, which we'll have here. Those of you furthest away, can you actually see it, or shall I ask Gareth to pull it down? You can see it? Okay, so here now is a model. Oops, I've got to stand here. I'll sit here. That Kate Raworth devised, and she calls it donut economics. So here you have a green donut. And in the donut, you will see that there's a limit on the outside. And the limit on the outside has terms in it like air composition and quality, water, oceans, salt and fresh water, land, food-producing land, the built environment, biodiversity, plant and animal life. So this outer green circle are the boundaries, really, of what of the planet that we live in. Because if we're consuming the resources of this planet and ejecting all the waste back into the planet without much thought, then things will happen. And the things that have been happening are actually producing major, drastic, and even existential threats to life on this planet, but also the major planetary systems that have been keeping the planet fairly stable for the last million years. So we're now entering a new age called the Anthropocene, and we're entering probably the 6th mass extinction, because again, most of you will have heard how insect life has dropped dramatically, and that in the last, 50 years, I mean, the biomass of the whole planet has dropped dramatically. So we have scientists who are very, very worried about what is happening on the inside of that donut. We have a shortfall of human needs, really, that people are not living good lives. People are dying prematurely. People are living under terrible exploitation and oppression. And on the outside we're overshooting, on the inside we're not producing things that will actually meet people's needs. And within the donut you can see the things, if you can read it, things like housing, energy, water, health, nutrition, education, political voice. These are all the kind of social needs that help make civilization and a decent society what it is. So here she's showing in a model of like what a sustainable economy could be like. It would be centered around human needs and aspirations, but it would be set within planetary boundaries. And there are plenty of earth scientists now who have documented exactly what those boundaries are like. And we're certainly living way behind them. There are other academics who are concerned about transforming capitalism or neoliberalism into a completely new economy. And George Monbiot is somebody you've probably heard of because he's a popular writer. And then there's Tim Jackson, who is a professor who actually wrote a book called Prosperity Without Growth. So these are two people who, I'm happy to give you details of their books afterwards, but they can actually give us a model. And very briefly, to sum up, within that they are asking for change in very different ways. They're asking us to think about changing ourselves. So how do we actually use language? How do we frame concepts like growth is good into actually thinking about, you know, consumption? What do we consume? Can we consume less at the household level? At the kind of national level, what can a state, what can a government do to bring about the changes that are necessary to stop the overconsumption, but actually give us things that we need as human beings? And finally, then there's business itself, and I think the big questions we have here: can we really expect business with a profit motive as the bottom line, right, and which governments allow? Can we expect business to change their kind of patterns for accelerating growth? Or do we have to have regulation in order to do that? So, you know, there are big ventures, I think, you know, through the kind of circular economy. Businesses are taking on board that. They've heard what the public have to say about plastics, and they're kind of thinking about how they change their design of projects right from the beginning through to kind of end of life. But will it be enough when profit is still allowed to drive growth? So I'll leave you there.